If your team is struggling to come up with truly innovative ideas, then check this book out and try one of the 5 methods for generating ideas, innovative ideas. You can tell that this book is somewhat destroyed by the edges. It's because I read it so much. This book is Inside the Box by Drew Boyd and Jacob Goldenberg. It's a proven system for creativity for breakthrough results. This book gives a framework for coming up with innovative ideas. And in previous videos, or a couple of videos ago, we discussed a scientific method for creativity and how ludicrous that can sound. But it's true, there's a way to do it. In fact, there's a proven way to do it through this method called Systemic Inventive Thinking. Now, the reason why this book was created is because, as you know, as adults, we suffer with generating ideas that are truly innovative. The reason for this is structural fixedness. It is our brain's way of understanding the world in which we live. Once we make up our mind that something is the way it is, it's really hard for us to break that down and to look at it from different angles and for it to become something new to us. That is structural fixedness. And these 5 methods that the authors go through in really great detail, as in enough detail for you to run this yourself with your teams, it helps us to step outside of that. It's also a great way to show people that they don't have to be naturally creative like how children are. You don't have to do something that makes you feel, sometimes a little bit silly in order to get your creative juices flowing. It's a methodical approach and it works. Now, the book is called Inside the Box Thinking. Think inside the box. We're always taught to think outside of the box, but the authors have turned this on its head and is forcing us to look within the closed world of the problem instead of the first thing that comes to our mind, which is, okay, we have this problem. Where can we go outside of the problem to find the solution? It encourages us to look closely at the environment the problem sits within, or the product itself that we're trying to innovate, what it's made up of, and how we can tweak or change what's already there to make a new innovative product or service. When we think outside of the box, we're thinking, what's our competitor doing? Let's go do that, but do it better than them. What new feature, what new thing can we add? Can we make this thing faster? Can we make this thing thinner? Like the example I was talking about in terms of mobile phones. Or what's quick and easy for us to do that our customers haven't seen before? So for them, it's innovative, but it's easy for us to do. That's how we normally think. This turns it on its head. So a word that you're going to hear a lot in the book is the word component. Most of the ideas, most of the frameworks, the 5 frameworks for coming up with new ideas involves looking at a product or a service, breaking it down into its individual functional components, and then doing stuff to it to make something new. What do we mean by component? We're thinking about functional components here. And if we think about a pen, for instance, the functional components are the body of the pen, the nib of the pen, the ink barrel of the pen, and the cap. Those are the functional components of the pen. We don't go into too much minute detail about the type of ink and all of that stuff. We just keep it as basic as we can, as simplistic as we can, so people can understand what the functional makeup is of the product or the service. And then the second question you're going to have right now is, so what are these 5 techniques that we're talking about here? The 5 techniques are 1, the subtraction technique, 2, the division technique, 3, the multiplication technique, and you can see a trend here. If you think the 4th one is an addition technique, you're wrong. Addition does not exist in these frameworks. If you're enjoying this content, as usual, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe if you haven't subscribed already. It really helps out the channel. The 4th technique is Task Unification, and the 5th technique is Attrivute Dependency. So let's go through these quickly. What's the subtraction technique? The subtraction technique is the idea that less is actually more. It involves taking a product or service, listing all of the functional components, taking away one of those from that list, and asking questions about this new product that we have created without these key functional components within it. We start asking questions. How could this new product be useful? To whom could it be useful? And why would it be useful? Sounds crazy? Let's think about some examples in the real world. Take a fitness watch, for instance. I'm not wearing mine right now, but I normally am. A fitness watch that has a screen on it. The screen is part of the functional components of the fitness watch. Now imagine taking away that screen. What benefits would this have? The device is lighter, the device is smaller. Now you don't need to only have a watch. You could have different types of devices like a ring, for instance, or a bracelet. These already exist in the market. I'll show you some pictures right now. That's an example of the subtraction technique at work. Now the division technique. This is where you list all the functional components and then you change their order. So all the functional components are listed in a particular order. You take one of those components, pull it out temporarily, and you place it somewhere else. All right, let's give an example for services using the division technique. Take a restaurant, and we think about the service journey for a restaurant. You come in, you get seated, you order your food, you eat, you pay, you leave. Now, let's take the component of paying, and instead of putting it at the end, we put it at the beginning. You come in, you order what you want, you pay, you sit down, you eat, you leave. What benefit does this have? Faster service, less work for the waiting staff, and a quicker turnaround. That's great for fast food restaurants. This is what they do. And the third one now, the multiplication technique. We list all the functional components, and then we take one component and we multiply it. So instead of only one of those, we now have quite a number of them. Decide how many. And then each of those new multiplied components will do a slightly different job, so they don't do exactly the same thing. Need an example? Think about a pen with multiple inks in it. You've literally got 4 pens in one. When we think about the functional components, the nib, the ink barrel, the body, the cap, we take the ink barrel that, say, has black ink in it, and now instead of having one ink barrel with black ink, we have 4 ink barrels, one with black ink, one with blue, one with green, and one with red. 4 pens in one. And now we have the fourth technique, which is the task unification technique. This is where we assign an existing component that carries out a particular task with another task. So now it has to do its original job and then something else. A great example in the book is of reCAPTCHA or CAPTCHA. It's when you're on a website and you notice sometimes to prove that you're a human and not a robot, it's asked you to clarify words or to select pictures. Now, when this was first invented or when it was first used, it had a secondary purpose. The purpose that we know of is to make sure that we're not a robot and that we're actually people trying to access the site. But if you remember those times when you had the reCAPTCHA with the really weird lettering and you had to try and figure out what the words said, what they were actually doing is taking old text that were not digitized and then digitizing them. So the words that came up that the machines couldn't make sense of, they'd show it to enough people trying to get into websites. And one, it would, make sure that it would prove that the person trying to get in is actually a person, but it would also work out what that weird looking word actually was. And so we ended up digitizing a bunch of ancient or older text through this process really quickly through the task unification technique. And lastly, we have got the Attrivute Dependency technique. This is where you take the characteristics of 2 things that previously weren't interdependent, they weren't related at all, they could operate independently of each other, and you make them dependent on each other in a meaningful way. What does this mean? Let me give you an example. Let's say I have my car and me and my partner, we both use the car. If I go into the car and sit down on the car, let's say there's sensors in the seats, Depending on my weight, it can tell that it's me in the car, and then it changes the radio settings, the Bluetooth settings, the seat settings, to the aircon or the heating to a level that I find comfortable, my own personal user settings. So before, these two things were not dependent on each other, but now we have linked them up in a really meaningful way that is useful to the user. This is what attribute dependency is. So now we have quite a number, 5 methods of systematically generating ideas, new innovative ideas. And it's something that you can try out with your teams. Get the book, have a read of it. It's truly an amazing read. And when it comes to finding books that are great on creativity, that's my thing, man. I love doing that. So I will continue to share with you. If you like this video, if you want to try out systematic inventive thinking or any other ways of generating ideas, let me know. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you in the next one.